When we think of truly happy people in our mind's eye, we tend to picture millionaires, executives, or maybe even retired people. We tend to equate possessions, prestige and pleasure with being carefree. Conversely, we tend to think of poverty as leading to sadness. But in all honesty, the evidence does not bear this out. Certainly some of the most impoverished people that I have met, as I've been privileged to travel to various parts of the world, have been some of the most content. Happiness, the experts say, is dependent on external triggers. People, things, places, thoughts and events. Whereas joy is much more consistent and cultivated internally. This section of Paul's letter to the Philippians is truly inspirational. It bears all the hallmarks of authentic Christianity. Paul was writing from prison, chained up. His circumstances were pretty dire. But rather than weary, anxious, discouraged, pain-filled words, his writing was cheerful, optimistic, undiscouraged and confident in Christ. He even speaks of joy. Just look at some of the phrases in the passage. Advancing, confident, fearless, defending, rejoicing, delivered, progressing with joy. To pick up on another bit of Paul's writing from a short while earlier, Romans 8:29-30. It's known particularly in Calvinist circles as the golden chain of redemption. The reason that Paul was so upbeat was that he had already realised that his salvation was assured. The passage says, "For those God foreknew, he also predestined, to be conformed to the image of his Son. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified." Big words, but put more simply, Paul had fully grasped that he was known by God, destined and invited to be with God, made worthy by Christ, and ultimately he would be lifted up by God. For him, the chains were not something to be sad about, as he knew that nothing he ever encountered was outside of God's plan. Paul had already seen his chains broken in Acts 16, and surely heard of it happening on other occasions to other disciples. For him, the chains were only temporary, no matter what the outcome of his imprisonment. The challenge here is clear for us all. How do we respond when circumstances begin to drag us down? Are we someone who allows the weight of life to begin to dull our hope? Or do we welcome the breeze of the Spirit blowing refreshingly through us and see God's presence, his perspective, his power and his purpose all around us? Do the chains of life bind us, or do we see them as links in his plan for our lives? Paul is clear. Whatever the outcome, with Jesus alongside him, everything will be just great. For Paul, and in turn for us, life with Christ is for living, not just for enduring.